Welcome back. Today we're going to talk about some ZiSin cables, and perhaps you've heard of the brand ZiSin. You probably haven't heard of their new store, which is actually the ZiSin Audio Store. There are other stores that have ZiSin in the name. This one is on the newer side. Like I said, this one was established kind of right at the end of last year, around December. I wasn't aware of this one. They kind of pointed out to me, oh, we're the ones that have the blue icon, and I didn't really know what they were talking about until you find it on AliExpress, and I'll include links so you could actually find them. But yeah, again, if you watched my other videos on cables recently, you sort of know that they are coincidentally timed around sale periods. I like to purchase cables during sale periods. So it's a bit of a dice roll for me because they contact me well before the sale and say, hey, you kind of interested in doing this. And then I picked out 4 cables that I thought were interesting to me, but I have no idea what they were going to be or how they were going to be priced during the sale period. So while these were of interest to me and I thought that they have kind of good stories and things to talk about, you're probably going to want to browse their store and see which cables are actually on sale, which ones have promotional prices and coupons and all that thing. Those are the things that are going to be most interesting during the April sale period that we are going through now. And for those of you in the United States, tariffs are about to kick in, so you're kind of running out of time to make any purchases before they are hit with some bigger tariffs that are about to kick in kind of at the beginning of May. So as I said, ZiSin Audio Store, kind of by the same people who were behind ZiSin Audio, the other ZiSin Audio stores. This one happens to have the blue icon, like I said, so you'll kind of see that one on the AliExpress store. But we'll start with kind of their, I don't even know if it's their flagship, but I would call this one similar to one of the current flagship cables that are out there. So this is 6 cores, and pretty much 3 out of the 4 cables we're going to talk about are 6 cores. 2 of them are actually braided in this way. So I call this one the flat braid. So it looks kind of, I don't know, it looks kind of reasonable from the top, but when you look at it from the side, it's actually much thinner than your typical cable, which would have almost equal dimensions. So this one, I call it flat because typically your cable is about, the width here is about the same as the height here, but here, if you can kind of see, it's about half of the height is about half of the width. So it's actually pretty cool. They call it flat braid. I don't know. There's some other names. I think we'll actually talk about one in a second. But this flat braid, this style cable, this material, this is 8N material. As I've said before, this is pricey material. This is, I would call it sort of a flagship in that respect, in that the material. And maybe we'll start with the resistance. So these 2 guys are going to be about 0.2. I think one of these, I think they call this one 0.18, and they call this one maybe a little bit higher, but they're generally about 0.2. These 2 are kind of about 0.3, and we'll get to those as well. But when I talk about this particular cable, it's similar to XIN HS Ace, which I talked about in a previous video. The braiding is very similar. The materials are actually different. The colors are different, but I think it's kind of along the same lines of very, very expensive material. So this is 8N OCC. Then there's some silver crystal, silver plated palladium, rare earth materials, high conductivity. And then the other cable. So I think the actual purple is the 8N. I think this material and that material are actually the same. And then you get some 7N OCC, oil immersed graphene, plated palladium, rare earth alloy, rare silver palladium. So the red cable, I think in this case, is actually very expensive 7N OCC with multi-material as well. So you're getting 2 expensive materials in a flat braid, which is a little bit more manual for them to assemble. So yeah, this whole thing becomes quite expensive. This one is about $222 for this guy. That's sort of why I say it's more of a flagship priced for them anyway. But 6-core flat braid, it does feel a bit stiffer and a denser material. And what I'll say is the sheathing material on this one just happens to be a little bit thinner than perhaps these 2 cables. So it does feel, maybe not as soft as the other cables, and maybe it feels a little bit stiffer than the other cables. And I would say that this braiding style feels a little bit stiffer as well. And I said the same thing about Ace. So yeah, I actually do love Ace. I think that is a very high quality cable. but the feel of it is just kind of slightly different than what you may get on if you're especially used to some of your stock cables. But $222 for this guy. It is part expensive materials, part hand braiding. The assembly, like I said, the 8N OCC material tends to bump the price, so be sure that's what you want. You can actually get 8N. We'll talk about this cable in a second. This one's a little bit cheaper. This one is kind of more material, a little bit thicker. 8N is just going to bump the price, and so be sure that is something that you are really into buying. And I forgot to talk about the case. This is the new ZiSin case. I haven't actually seen this one before. Kind of similar to the other ones. I'm kind of used to the old fabric cases, so this one is a little bit different for me. So moving on to ZiSin 312. They call this one Dan Luo Tang. So I will say it's actually very similar to the first cable, the 313, but the price is about half. Let's see, 125 instead of 222. And I'll say part of that is material. Part is actually the thickness of this one as well. So I think the amount of material, the amount of expensive material isn't quite the same. The thicknesses are actually a little bit different. So this is a thinner cable. There's probably less expensive material. This is the thicker version, a little bit more expensive material. The silver, I think, is just SPC here. So that is kind of more of a typical style material that you would find in a cable, any cable that they sell in their store. But I think the look is actually pretty nice. This purple and silver is actually a pretty good combination. As I said, the resistance between these two, if you're into measurements, is actually quite or pretty close to the same. This one does have 8N OCC as well, and I think I'm pretty sure it's the same purple, but the other material is a less expensive version of 7N OCC. They call it silver-plated palladium. So you don't get the oil-immersed, graphene-plated, palladium, rare earth. It's not the mixed bundle of expensive material that you're going to get on 313, sort of more of a traditional SPC style that you're going to get there. And again, it's a little bit thinner. There's probably a few less strands in this version than this one. But as far as getting a flat braid, this one, again, is another flat braid cable. So when we look at it from the side, it is quite flat, just a little bit thinner than the other one. But if you are looking for this style of flat braid, but don't want to spend $200 and something, this is sort of the next level down of what you can actually find in a more affordable cable that is very similar to this look, but just done in different materials. And this is the one, they call it 6-core fried dough twist. And maybe they think about pretzels. I'm not sure what the fried dough is. It's probably not a funnel cake. It's not a donut. So I think pretzel was the first thing that came to my mind, but I'll just call it flat braid because it's pretty much the same braid between these two. And so why is this one about half the price of this one? As I said, thinner cores, cheaper material, but very similar look. It's the one that you want if you just want a flat braided cable to have that look. And again, the purple and silver is actually quite attractive as well. That'll match with quite a few style of IAM faceplates. Just, I think it's pretty much the same. You're still getting a flat braided cable. You're still getting some 8N material. It's just not as much 8N as that guy. So I think this one's more of a bargain, more of a good value set. And if you have a coupon that adds brings that down a little bit, you're doing pretty good there. But the feel, again, this one's a little bit slightly thinner. It does feel a little bit less dense than this one. It feels kind of closer to a regular cable than this one does. And I will say the same thing about Ace. They don't quite have that softness and pliability that other cables do. This is kind of getting a little bit closer to that style. So we'll move on to number 302. So ZiSin 302, they call this one the Candle Dragon. And this is the one that actually caught my eye when looking at the listings. And I'm not sure this is actually going to, it'll half show up on camera maybe. So what's actually a little harder to notice under bright lights is that you actually get a contrast in colors here. So looking at it from one side, you get a brighter version of the silver poking through, and then you get a darker version. I'm not sure it's actually going to come through on video. It's probably not going to. If you look at their pictures, it kind of comes through in a more exaggerated way. But this one, I would say it actually caught my eye for two reasons. One, it is a 6-core, but this is a 6-core that is actually braided differently than these two. So they call this one the rounded braid. This is the two flats. So this one is rounded, and this one it looks more traditional. So again, when you look at it from all sides, it has kind of the same amount of width and height, and it's probably the same because they call it a round. And actually, looking at it like that, you can kind of see that there are flashes of brighter silver that come through, then there are spots of darker. And this contrasting spots is actually pretty unique to me and why it really caught my eye. They say the resistance is about 0.48. I will say I got about 0.33 on this one. It is really nice material as well. So this is single crystal silver plated palladium, rare earth alloy, copper, high conductivity again, 7N OCC, oil immersed graphene plated palladium, rare earth metal alloy. So again, kind of a mix of materials that are all high quality materials. They call this one the 6-core circular braid, which is kind of new for me. And I would say it almost has the thickness of a 4-core or an 8-core, but done in 6-core. So the weight is actually a little bit less. And again, I think that's just a little bit unique, something that kind of caught my eye and why I tend to like the 6 cores. The 4 cores tend to be a little bit thicker, a little bit heavier, kind of maybe sometimes a little bit thicker. The 8 cores kind of, you get thinner cores, but there's more of them, and you get kind of a density too. 6-core being right in the middle is actually something that I actually like. And again, kind of what caught my eye on all of these, on at least all 3 of these, were the 6 cores. And that was sort of what jumped out to me about the ZiSin store and what they had for sale at the time. So the feel on this one, it's very similar to most cables, but the light and dark stranded unique here, combined with the quality materials, and you're about $160. But again, what I say, what really caught my eye about this one is it almost has a gunmetal patina to it, where you get the light and the dark flashes, and the way it catches the light is quite a bit different than, you know, even a cable like that. This is actually a custom version of this one, so it's a little bit longer, about 1.3 meters. It has the L-type modular kit on it. And what I'll say about the 1.3 meters is, and where that number came from, was that is the number that stores tend to let you get away with without adding to the price of it. So if a normal cable is about 1.23 meters, 1.3 meters is, I think, technically about 3 inches of added length to it. In reality, how they give you, you know, if you say I want it a little bit longer, it's somewhere between 3 inches and 3, 4, 5 inches, probably not 6. But for me, sitting at my desk with desktop amps, with IEMs, I need just a few inches extra so I have a little bit of slack and I can move my head around or lean back. So that is why I actually started kind of quite a bit time ago asking for 1.3 meters. And sometimes it's possible to do it. On these 2 cables, I doubt they're going to give you an extra little bit of cable at 1.3 without adding to the price. On kind of more affordable cables, they tend to be a little bit more willing to do it. So, you know, I tend to ask for it, and if they say no, we can't do it, and I'll say how much. But, you know, I will always try to ask and say, well, is some cables is just not possible. They're already pre-cut. You can't get different lengths without actually adding to quite a bit of the cost. And some of them, you know, on this one in particular, the 302, they said, yeah, we'll make you a little bit longer. We'll put a modular kit on it. So yeah, this one, number 1, caught my eye. Number 2, it's a little bit longer, so that is more comfortable for me to use. And I like the modular kit. So yeah, all around, I think, actually, I like this cable. I probably like Ace a little bit more because it has the Pentagon. This one is the good value one. This is the one I would probably use most often because it's a little bit longer. It feels really nice. It's something a little bit new because I haven't had a rounded 6-core before. So yeah, there's a lot that I like about this one, and it actually measured kind of fine, just about what you would think. But you know, I think the customizations on that one actually kind of put it over the top for me. So this one also sort of caught my eye in the way, and we can kind of see it here. So if you look closely, there's kind of flashes of green and red. So showing through kind of the smoked PVC sheathing on this one, you can kind of see the wire kind of showing through, and it gives you flashes of color like the red and the green. Sometimes it looks a little blue. I think it probably looks, it's somewhere between like a greenish blue and a red. The red is probably more of a copper because it's probably copper showing through. But yeah, it is a cool cable. This one is called ZiSin 324, the time capsule. They say the resistance is about 0.58. Again, I call this one about 0.33. It is 7N OCC silver plated alloy copper. It is a 2-core cable. I do like 2-core cables. I like 2-core cables because you could use them as headphone cables if you change these 2 pins to 3.5 or whatever your headphone connector is. They make actually quite nice headphone cables. I would say smoked PVC with the red and green showing through is actually pretty cool. And again, this one has a softer feel. This is exactly what you're expecting if you're used to stock cables, which have a really nice soft PVC sheathing on them. That's exactly what you're going to get here. There are some 2-core cables which tend to be a little bit stiffer, a little less pliable. This is not one of them. So this is another one that kind of, I would say, is fine for using as a headphone cable because it is soft and pliable. There's no stiffness to it. But when I read PVC sheath, this is exactly what I think of for that kind of feel. And again, this one's pretty attractively priced, about $36.27. And again, this one's about 1.3 meters instead of 1.23 meters. And it's sort of, for me, just using these back and forth with IMs, these two are sort of noticeable. When I kind of lean back, I sort of notice that there's still some slack in the cable. These, kind of hit my head or kind of tug on the IMs. I'm like, yeah, I wish these were 1.3 as well, but not going to ask them to, put some more money into cables that they're already sending to me. So I'm kind of happy that I got these as well. So again, ZiSin Audio Store in the blue, April sale going on now. Get in before tariffs potentially kick in. Lots of reasons to go look at their store and see what is actually on sale. As I said, these were of interest to me as far as the 6-core and the different styles of braiding and the high quality materials. But for you who are kind of picking up a normal cable, go do look and see what is on sale. Go click on their coupons and make sure you have those added to your cart and your account so you get the best price possible. And do ask them about any customizations like 1.3 meters or modular kits and see if that will increase the price of the cable that you are interested in as well. So thank you guys again for tuning in, and I will see you next time.